If you look at our rock bed right now, it is full of weeds. And we just went out there right when the weather was getting nice and we pulled out all the weeds. And kind of just like marriage, we walk by every day. If I really wanted to care about these weeds, I could come home from work and I see one weed and I could walk over there and just pull it. But instead, I'm like, nah, it's not that big of a deal. So I'm just going to walk right by and carry on with my life. And then the next day I know, oh, there's 2 or 3 more weeds. And I'm like, but that would take me about 10 minutes. I don't have 10 minutes right now. And next thing you know, we're going to have to spend a whole day out there sweating and really getting this down. So in your marriage, don't walk by that weed. We're going to give you 10 weeds in your marriage that needs to be pulled out.
We talk about the church, family, theology, and even entertainment. In fact, if it's Christian, we're talking about it. This is the Mike Charleston Show.
Welcome to the Mike Charleston Show, and thank you guys for listening on a beautiful spring day. And as you can see, we are short 2 people. We're not short people, but I kind of.
Well, you always say I'm short.
Yeah, well, Chuck and Larry are not with us, and.
Hi. I'm still Larry.
Well, no, you're not here. Sorry, Larry. And Chuck's in Ohio, and Larry's in Virginia. So They're the world travelers right now, and we're stuck here. And no, that's good. That's good. So we're doing a different kind of show today. It's just going to be Sarah and I, and that's good.
Yep, it's going to be fun.
Is it?
I hope so.
Is this a kissing book?
Well, we'll find out. But no, we got a really good we got an interesting topic we're going to do today, and that is, well, let me ask you a question first, babe. What's your favorite time of year?
I always say my favorite time is fall.
Fall.
And I love fall, but I will say spring's a close second.
I wonder if it's like when you're born in. Like I'm born in the springtime, so I love spring. You're born in fall.
And I love fall.
Well, down here in Louisiana, it has been spring for a while.
It has been.
And the thing about spring is I love spring just because we're coming out of winter and I can't stand the cold. So I like that it's getting warmer. Everything's turning green. I love green.
The green is beautiful. It's just, to me, it just gets a little too warm too quickly, and it's kind of like, it's fine. Like lately the weather's been nice, but you kind of brace yourself knowing summer's coming. So
yeah, it's coming. It's around the corner,
scary.
But we've had some nice days.
Yeah, we have.
And the one thing I don't like about spring, so let me explain something to you. That in our front of our house, we have, I don't even know what you want to call this. It's a rock bed. That we have struggled for 7 years to do anything with. So it wasn't originally a rock bed. It was just dirt.
Right.
And it had bushes or plants. It had weeds in there.
It had weeds.
It had a bunch of weeds. And we decided to pull all the weeds. We're going to put some, that black, what do you call that stuff? The
no weed stuff.
Right? No weed stuff. And put that down and put a bunch of rocks and just have like a little rock thing and maybe put some pots of plants on and just kind of make it look nice.
We've tried planting specific plants in there.
Yes. And for 7 years, we have struggled with weeds. It is unbelievable that they are so bad. I don't know what kind of creeper is in that thing. All kinds of weeds. Yeah. Well, that is what we're going to be talking about today. It is springtime, people, and we're going to be talking about marriage. We just came back from a weekend where that was the focus was marriage. So I thought, well, this is appropriate. Let's talk about pulling weeds out of your marriage garden. So we have a garden, and yes, it's time to pull out weeds. You go in there, and we're going to give you 10 weeds in your marriage that needs to be pulled out. And so hopefully this will help you guys out. But we just thought it would be appropriate because it is springtime.
And the weeds are back.
If you look at our rock bed right now, it is full of weeds. And we just went out there, 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Right when the weather was getting nice, and we pulled out all the weeds.
And it looked really nice for several
weeks. Yes, and it is
weeks.
completely back. They're bigger and badder.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's the problem. It has new life, but it also brings out stuff. So in your marriage, there is going to be things that come out, and this is time for spring cleaning. And you want to look at yourself in the mirror and say, okay, what can I do to help my marriage? If you don't want to help your marriage, then you might want to just turn off the podcast right now. But I'm assuming you would like to help your marriage. And if you think you have a good marriage, well, then stay tuned to keep it that way. Right?
That's right. Yep. Well, most people know if you have any kind of garden or any outdoor area that it takes work to make it look nice.
I guess so, because we've never done well with a garden. So.
We've tried with little areas, but yes, we don't have green thumbs.
No, we don't. We know how to grow weeds. So that's not indicative of our marriage, but we do know how to grow a lot of weeds.
Yeah.
And we do well with herbs, certain herbs we can grow. But other than that, it's been a difficult thing for us to grow things.
Pretty much.
But yeah, so to go, but in a normal household that has a garden, they know it takes a lot of work.
Right.
You have to water it, you have to fertilize it, you have to tend to it, you have to pull weeds. Mm-hmm. And in our case, it's not really a garden we're worried about. It's just the look of the front. And
we don't want it to look like we haven't tended to it.
Yes, and unfortunately, right now, it looks like we just ignore it. Well, in kind of just like a marriage, we walk by every day. And if I came home, like if I really wanted to care about these weeds, I could come home from work and I see one weed and I could walk over there and just pull it. Yeah. But instead I'm like, nah, it's not that big of a deal. It's not that big of a deal. So I'm just going to walk right by and carry on with my life. And then the next day I know, there's 2 or 3 more weeds. And I'm like, but that would take me about 10 minutes. I don't have 10 minutes right now. And next thing you know, we're going to have to spend a whole day out there sweating and really getting this down. So in your marriage, don't walk by that weed.
Right.
Don't
those little
walk by
things that you think, it's not that big a deal. Because at first, when they start coming up, they're really small and the roots aren't that deep.
Easy to
and
pull
you really
out.
could just go and take them. But at this point, it's going to take a
There's
lot.
some weeds
of
that
work.
where I'm trying to rip out, and I'm like, I can't even get down to the root,
right.
And it becomes very difficult. And I could just take off the top where the ugliness is, but the root is still there,
Right.
and it comes right back, bigger and badder than ever.
And they spread. So instead of just having 2 or 3, it's like I don't know. So
it's a perfect picture of kind of what happens in marriage, and that's what we're going to help try to avoid in your lives. And maybe some of this will help you. Don't ignore the weeds. That when they're small, when there's little problems, deal with them then, because it's so much easier than trying to go get counseling after 20 years of marriage and that root is not coming up. And you pull and you have to get a shovel, and it's possible it will work,
possible.
but it's a lot more work.
And usually requires, you look at a house that's been abandoned for years, you're going to need sometimes heavy equipment and big time tools and a lot of help to get it back in order.
I like tools.
Okay.
Yeah. So they start as what weeds are they start as innocent, right? No big deal.
Right.
They don't look like a big deal at first. And then as soon as they do, they take over and spread. And then we need to get a weed guy out there to kill it.
Pretty much.
So that is kind of what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah.
So let's just go ahead and get into it. So we have 10, right?
Yep, that's what we came up with. Probably could have come up with more.
This isn't exhaustive by any measure. And in fact, if you think you have a couple more, go on to the Facebook page, Mike Charleston Show, and drop us a line there and put a couple others and encourage us there where we can look out some of these problems that spring up. And it's kind of, that's what happens. They spring up. And if we don't pay attention to them, they grow into a big, big, big problem. So we have 10 common weeds in marriage. And we're not unique to this. We've looked online, and a lot of people come up with these weeds. So if you're like, oh, man, they're just copying Family Life or Focus on the Family. Or
about 15 other websites I saw.
Yes.
It's just a good comparison. Because
it is a good comparison.
The way you need to work in a garden or in your yard is the same that you have to work in your marriage. So
absolutely. I wouldn't pull your wife's hair out, though. That's just not good. So don't do that. Okay. Number 1, and you said this has to be number 1, right?
Well, I meant to take that part out, but
it's fine.
I feel like it's number 1, but
it's
whatever.
Fine. It's all good. It's selfishness.
Yeah.
And I think that is the key of just about any relationship that you have. I don't care if you're married or if it's a parent-child relationship, if it's a friend, a best friend, any kind of relationship. Selfishness is going to rear its ugly head. It's going to grow really quickly.
Pretty much.
And probably pop up all over the weed bed. It's got the weed bed, the garden bed. Ours is a weed bed.
Ours is a weed bed.
Selfishness has to be up there, number 1. I think pride is number 1. We'll get there.
Well, and selfishness, because we live in a society where it's so much pushed that you need to take care of you, and I need to think about myself and take care of me so that I can take care of my kids and my family, whatever.
Yep.
So, and obviously, yes, I do have to drink and I have to eat and I have to sleep, but I think we don't need to be told that.
No, I
pretty
actually
natural.
just saw that post where another person put on there, and this is very common these days, where, it's really hard to help other people until you learn to love yourself. And I know a friend of ours, a young man in Tennessee, responded and said, well, what does that look like? And I said, well, I think it's obvious. That's we're making a God in our own image.
Yeah.
That's what that means, is I got to love myself and serve myself first and foremost. And if you get caught in that trap, that's a problem.
Pretty much.
That leads to selfishness and pride and arrogance. And I'm the center of the world. I'm the center of attention.
Yeah,
and it's a dangerous thing that's crept into the church.
It is. And I remember the girls asked me years ago, we were just talking and they were wondering which one of them, of the 5 of them, that I think would be the best wife when they get older. And I was like, well, I don't know.
You know what kind of answer? Anyway,
There is no
I'm
way.
not answering that question.
Well, anyway, I said, well, it's pretty simple. I said, whoever is the least selfish. I'm like, when you can, master putting other people ahead of you, then I'm like, then your marriage can be great.
Pretty much.
So.
Yeah. It's selfishness is a big, big weed.
Yeah.
It's one of those, it's probably that creeper that we just keep pulling and pulling and it never goes away. Romans 12:10, what does that say?
It says, be kindly affectioned one to another with brotherly love and honor, preferring one another.
Preferring one another. And I know, so I just made light of what we talked about, loving yourself. Jesus says to love your neighbor as yourself, and everyone focuses on the as yourself because, well, how can I truly love if I don't take care of myself? Look, that's not the problem. We already know how to do that. I think we are experts on loving ourselves.
Yeah.
That's not what I think Jesus was saying. You already do that pretty good.
Yep.
Love your neighbor just like that. It's not like we need to get in this mindset, oh, well, let's love ourselves first. No. We already do a good job of that.
Pretty
so,
much.
yeah.
Am I right or am I right or am I
yes,
right?
I am.
Yes, you are right.
So selfishness is number 1. So make sure you take care of that weed. Okay, number 2. What is that, babe?
We got bitterness and unforgiveness.
Bitterness. Now, bitterness, the Bible even says that grows. No spread.
Yeah.
So that's like clover or something that just keeps growing. That's like mint that just keeps taking over everything.
Pretty much.
And we're not trying to grow mint. And we did, and then it took over.
It's still growing.
That's like bitterness. But bitterness and unforgiveness, that's terrible. It's poison that spreads when you can't forgive, especially in a marriage. Look, the fact is your partner's not going to be perfect.
Right.
That is a reality. I know, right? That's shocking. But that's the reality that we get to the marriage and we think that this is going to be perfect and there's going to be no problems. If that's your expectations, you're in for a disappointment because we're going to disappoint each other, and sometimes we're going to sin. Sometimes that might happen, and we're going to have to exercise forgiveness. And if we don't, it's going to lead to bitterness, and that's a huge weed in a marriage where that love life that you have, that passion for one another is just going to go away. It's just going to shrink and shrivel, and it's not good.
Do you feel like men struggle with bitterness more than women?
I don't think so.
Because it says husbands be not bitter against. I never understood why it says
I think we
for the
just
husbands.
equally are embittered.
Okay.
I think guys, we keep things a lot more inward. We don't carry our emotions on our sleeve so much. So we keep it all in until one day we just blow up, we might get embittered in that way. Like, she doesn't care about me, or she wants to do all this. And we might become embittered more. But yeah, it does say, what does it say? Now I got put you on the spot. Huh?
Yeah, I know. I just know the last part of the verse says, "Husband,
be not embittered toward them."
Be not embittered
Right.
towards your
Yeah,
wives.
don't do that. It's not good. So that's number 2.
Yeah.
Number 3, and by the way, we're just going to go through these pretty quickly. We can't exhaustively go through these unless you want a 3-hour show. But we're just giving you a list of 10 things so you can go and check them out yourself. Go do a word study on these things. I think it's very important to look at these 10 things, and probably you could find some more.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So what's number 3?
Number 3, disrespect.
How dare you? Disrespect. So disrespect, everyone claims disrespect these days. You're not respecting me. You don't respect me. And you don't respect the kids. Kids don't respect parents. Authorities don't get respect. But insult and mocking. So that happens so subtly, which kind of goes with number 5 here. But when you take each other for granted a little bit, and there's a time and place where you can take jabs at each other and have fun. And I get it. We could kind of make fun of each other.
But you know when you cross that line.
Oh, I'm sitting in front of people that they are just they're incessant. They are making fun of their spouse, and it doesn't stop. And I'm like, oh my goodness, man. I mean, it's kind of funny, but it's brutal.
And it's one thing to do it just, in the privacy of our own home, but you see people doing it in front of other people, and I'm like, wow.
Yeah, that's disrespect.
Yeah.
And dismiss needs, So what do you mean? What do you think about dismissing needs?
Well, it's like you just don't pay attention when I'm, maybe I could be complaining or questioning, like, what do I do about this? And you just kind of don't even care to pay attention. It's just like, whatever.
Yeah, which kind of leads to the next one, right?
Yeah, fubbing.
That's not a point, but that's under disrespect. Now, if you don't know what fubbing is, it's what you do these days when you're in a conversation and you get a text message and you immediately look at the text message and you're just talking to that person.
Right.
And you ignore them to do that conversation. And in fact, you try to bring them and say, hey, Johnny just said this. And you're like, dude, I was just talking to you. I've had a number of people do that. And I just kind of look at them like, okay. So I'll just talk about aliens and things like that. And,
I got something to say.
But yeah, I guess they do. So they're interrupted. That's called fubbing. And that is disrespect, especially in a partner where, look, I've done this to you before and I'm not proud of it. But you're going on and talking about something and, well, you're talking about something and I get a text message and I quickly look at it and I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, uh-huh. And you know that I'm not really paying attention.
Right.
So you need to give each other that respect and pay attention to each other. But yeah, the insults, the mocking, the dismissing their needs, guys pay attention to this. Women have a lot more needs maybe than we do. And maybe not. Maybe in your relationship, you're like, no, my husband has more needs. But generally speaking, the women need a lot of attention and things, and we need to pay attention to that. Yeah. A lot of guys just are clueless. Yeah. I just checked out for the day. I got home from work. I'm good. Well, your wife's been working too, and she continues to work, and you can't just check out. Yeah. Okay, so number 4, I think, is like number 1, but maybe because I'm a guy. Number 4 is pride. Pride is a big one.
That is a big one.
Yeah, if you have that, you're probably going to need a couple people helping you with this weed. And but it's a huge one in a relationship. Proverbs 13:10 says,
only by pride cometh contention, but with the well-advised is wisdom.
Yeah, I mean, that's well said.
Yeah.
So why do we get in arguments? It's something within us. Like James talks about, it comes from within, and I want what I want when I want it. So it's kind of like selfishness.
Right.
But my pride and my ego gets in the way, and it's like, nope, I'm going to win this argument. I don't care at this point.
Right.
And this happens. We're human.
Yeah.
And I've done it before. I don't know about you. You don't have much pride. But I'm just a guy, so I'm just saying guys have, I'm not saying that you don't have any pride, but I probably think I struggle with this a lot more than you would.
Yeah, maybe. But I mean, like it says, won't say I'm sorry or finding fault. Like I feel like it's just hard to admit when you're wrong. And so sometimes
in that aspect of pride, yes. When
because it's humbling for me to say.
It's easy to blame. I know a lot of people who are having problems with their kids or having problems in the relationship with their spouses, and their number one move is to blame everybody else but themselves.
Right.
And that is a good indicator. You got to look at yourself in the mirror. And maybe it's not mainly your fault. And maybe it's not. Yeah. But you really got to take a hard look at yourself and be like, is it my fault? Why am I always blaming my wife? Why am I blaming my kids? What about not saying I'm sorry?
Yeah, and that's tough. And I mean, I don't know how many times, we've, on marriage things, you always read that you have to be able to say, I'm sorry. Practice saying, I'm sorry. If you want a good marriage, practice, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
And it's just, you think it's so simple and it's like, okay. And, young people getting married, they're like, oh, I don't have a problem. I'll just say, I'm sorry. But it's just different when you're really in the heat of something and you don't think that you're wrong.
Right.
And you're just like, no, he's the one that, this wouldn't be a problem if you would just whatever,
Right. Right.
So.
And then we dig in, and that's where pride comes in, and that's a big weed right there. Is that as a couple needing help, you won't ask for it. So that's another pride thing where
Right.
I know what I'm doing here. I'm the one who knows what's going on. You're the problem. Once again, pointing fingers. And, well, why don't you get help? I think everybody needs marriage counseling. You know, people are like, well, I think you have a pretty good marriage. Why do you need marriage counseling? I read marriage books all the time. I want to improve my marriage more and more. I read podcasts. I mean, I don't read podcasts. I listen to podcasts. I might read them. But I listen to different podcasts on marriage things. Some of it's garbage and some of it's not.
Yeah.
And I take what's good and try to apply that. I want to learn about that. This is kind of the most important relationship as apart from Christ that I'm going to have on this planet is you.
Yeah.
And so I want to learn how to do that better.
Right. Well, we know that the enemy wants to attack marriages. This isn't a secret. And so he's going to try to get in any way he can. So I want to be aware. I want to pay attention. And when people put things out there in books or podcasts or whatever, I want to pay attention like, oh, is this something that maybe could be creeping in just like these weeds we're talking about?
Yeah. I mean, I was like referenced to 5 Love Languages. That is not my favorite book, you know, but it has some good points in there and there's some things to think about. I mean, look, if you've been married 50 years and you can't figure out she wants you to do the dishes, that's on you, buddy. I mean, come on. That is ridiculous. But in a new relationship, or are you trying to better your relationship and you haven't really thought about some of these things and you're like, well, maybe she responds better to this or maybe he responds. It's fine. Take the book. Yeah. A lot of people have so much pride that they just can't read a book or get counseling. Look, the whole idea of counseling, I know you're thinking of like go to professional. Look, no. The biblical way of counseling is, especially for marriage, is find someone in your church that's been married for many years and looks like they have a good marriage. Yeah. Go talk to them and just as maintenance, you know, just as you would get a checkup. Well, I would say dentist checkup, but I don't really do that.
But most people do.
Right. And check up your car. You get it fixed. You start hearing something. And I say, Joshua, why don't you go check this out? And so it's okay to bring other people in and just like, hey, we want to talk through some things, making sure we're still on the same page. Don't be afraid. Let go of your pride.
Right.
You know, what is it that you need to think that everybody, you have a perfect marriage? Is it the image that you're trying to keep, or do you actually want a good marriage? That's the question you got to ask yourself. Yeah. Is it, are you afraid that other people are like, oh, they're talking to so-and-so. Do they have problems in their marriage? Let them think what they want to think. Right. But you want a better marriage, then go read all the books, go listen to all the podcasts, go get some counsel from people that are in your church or people you know that are older and know what they're doing. There's
people that have good marriages that you could look up to.
All right. Number 5. What do we have here?
Taking each other for granted.
Taking each other for granted. This is a subtle weed. It's right there. It's probably those little ones that peek up and you're just like, nah, I'm just going to leave that alone. And they never go away. Yeah. And they make everything look ugly and you got to take care of them one day. But taking each other for granted is probably a huge one. And that happens naturally in life. Right. You're just around someone so much. You're eventually going to take people, I don't care if you're in a workplace, a marriage, a friendship, just at some point, you're going to take people for granted. Yeah. And you got to work hard not to.
Yep, exactly.
And that part of it is what, babe? Expectations?
Expectations ruin relationships. A lot of times we expect too much. I just expect that, well, this is what you've always done, so this is what, you know, this is what you're going to do.
You've done this before, so why can't you keep doing this? Right. Well, because I'm tired of doing that. You know? I don't know. But, you know, instead, show your gratitude even for the little things. So it's kind of like, you know, you cook all the time. I don't always thank you for cooking, you know, and some people do get in a habit of thanking their wife and for cooking. You know, sometimes I cook, you know. Do you always thank me when I cook? You probably do.
Probably.
You probably do, because I don't do it all that often.
But I don't thank you for going to work every day. And I could come up with a whole list of things to thank you for that I don't.
Because that's what you're supposed to do, right?
Yeah, just kind of like, well, of course you're going to go to work. And of course I'm going to cook supper. And of course I'm going to, you know, clean the house or whatever. But
just because it's supposed to doesn't mean we shouldn't appreciate it.
Right.
Right. And I think that's the big thing is that your day in, day out stuff that is normal for you to do. Like me going to work. Yeah. Like, I don't remember the last time you said, well, thank you, babe, for going to work and bringing home money and all that. Right. And I don't need that necessarily. I mean, it wouldn't be.
It doesn't hurt though.
No, but it's, once again, you slowly just take for granted that that's going to happen. There's a lot of guys that don't go to work. you know? So there's a lot of ladies who aren't willing to stay home and cook and make homeschool the kids. And so we need to appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right, Joshua, I know that we're trying to watch our time here, and last time we went way over, but why don't we take a break? We got 5 out of the way. We're going to come back after this little break. We have a bunch of emails we're going to read, and well, actually 2, and take care of the 5 other weeds in the second half. So why don't you get us out of here, and we will come right back.
Thank you for listening. This is the Mike Charleston Show.
Okay, and we are back, and we were trying to come up with a game. Abigail is back, but she was thinking about a game, and I'm like, it just didn't really work out, and I'm like, you know what, it's fine, it's not going to work out this time. And so no game, but we do have a few emails, and Mark emailed, and his was a very interesting, in-depth, hard question to answer. And I thought we would wait until Chuck and Larry were on the show. I figured they would appreciate, because they like that kind of stuff.
They'll have lots to say.
I'm sure they will. So, Mark, we're not ignoring your question. We will get to that next time we get together with the guys. And it's a translation type question. So I know Larry will get into that, and Chuck probably will too. Anyway, we got a couple others here, and one here is from you probably guess by the end of the email, but go ahead and why don't you read it, babe? You don't have it in the light, so I can't see it.
Okay, sorry. Okay, it says, I really liked this episode on fear. Y'all covered a lot of good points and common problems and solutions. So
am I right or am I right or am I right?
I guess so.
Okay, so kudos to y'all. I would like to add that one thing that has helped me understand the fear of the Lord was to do a word study on that phrase. Several years ago, I came to the conclusion that it was a real fear, not merely just a respect. To know that when I don't depart from evil, which is the opposite of the fear of the Lord, there will be consequences in my life. The fear of the Lord prolongeth days, is the beginning of wisdom and knowledge. Paired with a little, it is better than great riches. Tendeth to life, paired with humility, brings riches, honor, and life, and is a fountain of life, the scripture says, and it goes on. It's a fascinating study. While I love God and hold him dearly close to heart and praise him, I also am afraid of him.
You're afraid? So is it like this?
I am your father.
Maybe not that much.
Maybe not quite that much.
Okay.
I also am afraid of him the same way a child would be afraid to disobey a parent, knowing the consequences would be sure, well, at least in parents who discipline their children.
Yes.
But keep up the good work. We really appreciate all of you. And I especially like that Chuck guy.
The Chuck guy.
Wink, wink.
You wink, wink. I wonder who that's from. This is Chuck Tate.
That's right.
So, yeah, we were talking about this just briefly, and I think I know what she's getting at, but I don't know. I kind of, when I say I'm afraid of God, I think I know what she's getting at, especially after reading that. But I hate saying that because I'm not afraid of him because of his love and grace, but we do respect, because he's God, man. He's an awesome being, and we don't just willy-nilly walk into his presence. We can walk into his presence, but there should be that fear. But I don't know. I mean, like we were talking about, like I'm not afraid of being damned to hell, because I'm a believer, and I believe in his promises, and he's going to save us, and he's a forgiving, loving God. But I do fear his chastisement.
I was going to say, I'm afraid if I sin, and not afraid that I'll go to hell, but I do fear that chastisement. Like, I know he's not going to let me just keep walking in that, so he's going to stop me, and that's not always pleasant.
Right, and just in the same way that, not that I live in constant fear of God like that, or constant fear of you, in fact, but if I do things that is against you, it's obviously going to cause friction in the relationship.
Right.
I don't want that.
Yeah.
So am I afraid of that? No, but I don't want that. And so I'm afraid that if I do these things, it's going to offend you. So I don't know if that's the same thing, but thank you, Jeannie, for, I wasn't supposed to, I was Mrs. Chuck Tate.
But the fear of the Lord is a great thing. And like she says, I mean, I think it'd be great
a fascinating study
for people to study that, because I'm pretty sure if you look around the world we live in, we could all use a little bit more of
Absolutely. I think a little bit more fear of God would go a long way. We just, especially in the church, we're just so we're so free, and I'm not against being free, but we don't really fear the things of God anymore. We were just talking about this at work today, a guy I work with, and he goes out witnesses a good bit, and one guy was just like, well, the Old Testament God was just so angry, and the New Testament God isn't. And I'm like, well, yes and no.
Same God.
It is the same God, but you got to think about the Old Testament covers years and years and years, hundreds, thousands of years of history. And yes, there is judgments that have been laid out. The New Testament only covers 50 years.
Yeah, it's very much shorter.
It's, if you want to throw Revelation in there in the 90 AD, not even 100 years. Let's just put that, that way. Right. It's not even 100 years. And even in that time period where the Holy Spirit was poured out and they were going from house to house and all that, Ananias and Sapphira were killed.
Yeah.
So, you just think about that. I mean, the God still takes things very, very seriously. And we have to be aware of that. And we don't want to fall into legalism and all that, but we still need to. God is God, man. And we're human.
Well, I do think sometimes we do just take God flippantly, kind of like we watched that video where you were talking about certain songs that are out there. And but it's like we just, he is the same God, but it's not like I can just demand what I want. And I feel like we just kind of don't understand who he is and just the vastness of his power. And we just think we can just kind of say, hey, I need you over here, do this or do that. And it's like, exactly, I need money, so give it to me.
Right, and we start demanding. Where's the fear?
Right.
My goodness, I demand healing. I demand you to part the waters for me.
Right.
And because you did it for the Israelites one time, actually twice with Joshua.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't, when I read the story, it didn't seem like they stood there and were demanding, hey, you get over here and do this.
No, there was a lot of fear involved. And God told Moses to, raise his hands and it split the waters and they went through. But that's a whole nother subject. But yeah. So this next email is from, who is this from? Brianne. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, it says, hello.
Hello.
I have seen a pattern of parents raising their older children conservatively and then becoming less strict on the younger ones. In some cases, the younger ones turn out totally different as a result and often marry spouses who hold lesser standards and convictions. Why does this happen, and how can young people avoid making that mistake with their own future families? Thank you for your podcast. I really enjoy listening to it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Brianne. Hesser. I don't know how to pronounce that, but we appreciate you writing in and taking the time to write. So this is I don't think you can fix this problem.
It is a big problem.
As parents, we've talked about this. We need to be very aware and pay attention. Now, just because you raised them very conservatively does not make you right. Maybe you were too strict, and you learned a lesson. And then as the younger ones came up, I know our older kids think that the younger ones get away with more. And I'm like, that's not necessarily true. They were just better than you guys were. No, okay. Kind of. But because they have learned that they grew up in the system, I had to start the system with them. And so it was a little bit different. Yes, we were probably a little bit more strict with the older ones. As far as the younger ones marrying worse, I don't know because they haven't been married yet. So we'll find out, guys. Yeah. But no, I understand what she's saying, though, because I've seen some of these things that, yes, they start out. And I think what happens is parents just get tired.
Yeah,
it's a lot of work.
Especially when you see some families. We got a 20, 25-year span from when they started to when they had their last kid. Well, you don't have the same energy when you're 45 as when you were 25.
And you're also changing as a human. And so maybe you're not thinking this was as important. Yeah. And it's hard when you have adult children or getting to adult children. So you have a 16, 17, 18-year-old living in the home with an 8-year-old. Mm-hmm. It's just different. I know people like to say, well, you just train them the same. No, you don't. You can't.
Yeah. It has to change. And I know I struggled for a long time, because just our way of life changed. And I look at the way, the older ones were at a certain age, and then I look at the youngest ones and at the same age, and I'm like, oh, it's just different. And I feel like I loved what we did at the beginning. So I'm like, why can't I do that now? And I'm like, you can't. Because the whole dynamic is different. When
Abigail was 10, she was the oldest.
Right.
And there was a bunch of younger ones, and we're in a totally different phase. When Lydia was 10, Abigail is
17.
Right. And she's way different. She's starting to work. She's starting to drive a car. She's starting to, do different. She's going to work with me.
Yeah.
And so she's out of the house and she's with her dad, which is good.
Right.
But Lydia, all she sees is all the people ahead of her. And so it's just different. And I don't know if you can fix it, but you do need to pay attention. You can't just put it on cruise control.
Well, that's the thing. I think a lot of people do. Like for us, it could be easy to just kind of like, well, we did well. Our first kids are, getting married and things seem to be going well. So we can kind of sit back and relax.
That's right.
No, we're not done. And I feel like we have to continue. We have to stay to the end. It's not just starting well, it's finishing well. And so we have to pay attention. Yep. But I mean, there's no like easy answer. It's just pay attention. And well,
the fear I have is that parents will hear, we got to keep the screws on and you just make sure we have our rules in place. No, you have to adjust depending on the age. And that is tricky. I will grant you that. It's we had 7 and 8 years, so maybe it was a little easier for us. But it is tricky to have a 19-year-old in the house and a 9-year-old. A 9-year-old is not going to have the same privileges as a 19-year-old. Right. So you're like, well, it's not fair. Of course it's not fair. So the 19-year-old can have a Facebook account or maybe have more freedom and go out with friends or go on a trip or whatever. And the 9-year-old's like, well, why can't I? Because you're 9.
Right.
Right. And you can't.
But that 9-year-old is raised differently than that 19-year-old was when that 19-year-old was 9. Because the family dynamic is just different.
It's always going to be a little bit different of a dynamic. But I think what she's getting at also is just that they tend to give up on some of their convictions. Yeah. And that does happen. I've seen that throughout the years where you start out really gung-ho about we're just going to take this all seriously and we're going to be very intentional about everything. And just once you get through like this 3rd or 4th or 7th kid, you're just like, I'm just tired. Right. It's just, can't you guys just figure it out? and you know, so I think that's the problem. The parents do. So her question kind of was, why does this happen? I think we covered that, but how can young people avoid making this mistake with their own future families? I don't know if you can avoid it. Like I said, family dynamics change. Yeah. And so you have to adjust with it. You can still keep your convictions. You can still keep your way of life. It just has to change a little bit differently. And every kid is going to grow up. It can't be the exact same situation. We have to realize that.
And thankfully, that's why we have the Holy Spirit. And I believe if we're seeking Him and we, keep our head in the game, like, okay, God, we still want to do things right. But, I have my day's just going to look differently now that I have older kids and I got to take this one to work and I got to take this one to driver's ed and this one needs a bottle. I mean, so it's just like everything just is.
And what I don't different. Really like is, and I hope I don't step on any toes, but Sarah's like, is when we depend on our older kids to raise our small kids.
Right.
And yes, we want to teach our older kids responsibility, but it's not their kids. It's their sister, their brother, but it's not their kids. It's still our responsibility to discipline. It's not our children's responsibility to discipline children. That's ridiculous.
Right.
And we need to make sure that we're still in the game. That's the thing. It's like just because we decided to have a 2-year-old when I'm 45 doesn't mean that my 22-year-old that's still living at home has to raise my kid.
Right.
It's still my responsibility, and might be beside the fact that my 22-year-old may not have the same convictions, and it's not her own kid, and so she may not care as much, even though she cares for her brother and sister.
Right. In a different way, though.
Right. I mean, so the family dynamics are all different, and so you just have to be sensitive to the Holy Spirit, but you can definitely keep your same standards.
Well, and you should. And it seems like when people reevaluate convictions and standards, for some reason they always go backwards. And
they do. Sometimes they go the other way, and it gets harder and harder and harder. But and that's a whole nother issue for another day, is how to let young adults grow into that.
Right.
But because the same standard for a 9-year-old should not be the same standard for a 20-year-old. Right. And I feel like sometimes we keep everything the same to be consistent.
Right.
But you just can't. You're like, no, you can't read that book. I'm like, he's 20. She's 20. Right. It's a little bit different.
Exactly.
We did fall into that trap a little bit early on, where we're like, well, if it's not good enough for a 9-year-old to watch, then it's not good enough for a 19-year-old to watch. Now, we didn't have a 19-year-old at the time. But as we saw our kids growing up, I was like, well, no, it's not like this is sin. It's inappropriate, but it is. Right. like there was the Free Burma Rangers. It's pretty intense.
Right.
And do I just want to show my 5-year-old this? No, because there's a time and place for some conversations. And the older they get, they can handle things a little bit better, and they can handle things. It doesn't mean you can give them sin. I'm just saying they they need to understand life a little bit more. Yeah. So anyway, I hope that helps out, Brienne, not Brianna. So anyway, all right. Well, if you have an email, you can, I don't know, Joshua, what is the email address? talk@fellowshipofbelievers.org, talk@fellowshipofbelievers.org. And if you have a comment or a question, that'd be great. Thank you very much, Jeannie and Brienne.
Thank you for listening to the Mike Charleston Show.
All right, I heard that. And we are back. Sarah didn't know we were on, and that's fine. Yep. So we're going to finish off the rest of the weeds to pull out from your garden here. We already covered the first 5, and so we have 5 more here. Like I said, this is not exhaustive by any stretch.
Unfortunately, there's many more.
Oh, there is.
Are many more.
This world is full of sin and issues that we need to be aware of. So speaking of sin and issues, how about number 6?
Number 6, we have addictions.
Addiction. This one is definitely a big weed. This is, if only we had addiction of pulling out weeds,
Yeah.
And so, no, but unfortunately, most addiction, so what's the difference between good addictions and bad addictions? Because addiction is in the Bible one time.
Yeah, they were addicted
themselves.
to the word.
Yeah. And
I mean, like when we were young, we were addicted to Jesus.
I was A to J, man, addicted to Jesus.
But usually when you hear addiction, it has a negative connotation, unfortunately.
Because it is. And so the problem with addiction is it hurts people. It hurts because it feels like your spouse chooses drugs, food, spending. Okay, you added them on. Okay,
I did.
Pornography, gambling, alcohol, gaming over you. I mean, they feel like all those things are ahead of your spouse.
Right, because it feels like the person's pulled to that more than they're pulled to you. That's what they're drawn to. And as a wife, you want your husband to be drawn to you, not drawn to whatever it is that he's addicted to.
And I was going to say, some of these things aren't necessarily bad, but actually I'm looking and I'm like, okay, pretty much all of these are bad. But
I mean, food isn't bad, like we have to eat, and we do have to spend money.
And not to say that you can't play a game or something like that. But all the rest, okay, those are really bad sin issues. But so yeah, if you are addicted in some kind of way to something, that this is something that only, well, I guess your spouse might know too, but you've got to look deep inside and be like, okay, because it's so easy to justify, especially on the ones that aren't really so sinful. Like if you can justify pornography, you got problems. You got really problems. If you can justify your alcoholism, you've got problems. But if you can, a lot of us will justify gaming or eating habits or spending or shopping or all those type of things. We can justify those a little easier. Spending time with friends, whatever those, I don't know if spending time with friends is addiction. I just can't help myself. But whatever. Because part of the problem with addiction also leads to what?
Leads to financial problems.
And we were talking about this earlier, like how does it always? So I was thinking, well, because one of the things, so like gaming, is it really that financial?
Well, I know I talked to one lady years ago, and she was addicted to Candy Crush and she realized over the course of a year she had spent close to $1,000.
$1,000 on Candy Crush, and you don't even get real candy at the end of it.
So, I mean, to me, I'm like, okay, if all of a sudden, or not all of a sudden, but over a year, you find out that I secretly was spending money on Candy Crush,
it gets expensive.
It's going to be a problem.
Right. It does get, it does, that is true. And the bigger problem with the financing is it's not just the spending money on the gaming, or spending obviously is spending money,
right?
But like we were talking about specifically like pornography or something. Well, you can find it all over for free, right? I'm like, well, it's not just about that. You can send people away because you need to be alone. And so, how about you go get something to eat for us? How about I'll treat everybody, to justify your sin that you're about to commit. Or why don't you go do that? You find ways to get people out of your life so you can do your thing.
Right.
So whether it's gaming or your drunkenness, your alcohol, you spend a lot of money. I knew a guy once that was coming to me for advice on his problems and all that. And he said, I'm just not making it financially, and you're pretty good financially, so help me out here. And I was like, okay, well, how much do you spend on cigarettes and alcohol? And this was like 15, 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. He was like, $300 a month. And I was like, $300 a month? Wow. Are you serious? Well, there's your car payment right there. Yeah. Forget about whether a car payment's good or bad. You're drinking yourself into oblivion. And unfortunately, he did drink himself to death. But, these addictions usually lead to dishonesty too.
Yeah.
You got to lie about it.
Right. It's embarrassing because you realize you shouldn't be doing whatever it is that you're doing.
No one wants to be
much.
pointed out and be like, you shouldn't be doing, so you tend to lie.
Yeah.
People are shocked. And I'd have to try to counsel. When I counsel people, I'm like, don't be shocked that people lie. That's what I kind of expect, because you're caught. You're in something that you realize, oh, I'm eating too much, or, I might be addicted to gaming or pornography. If you don't think that's a problem, once again, that's a problem.
Right.
Or you just, all these different addictions, you get caught up in it, and then it's embarrassing. Yeah. So you tend to downplay it or lie about it, and that becomes more of a problem. What I don't like is if they stay in that lie. So I kind of expect a lie, honestly, but I do expect them to come back to their senses and go, you know what? I lied about that. I really did lie about that, and I do have a problem. And once they realize that they have a problem, that is where they can start healing and getting that freedom from that problem. But addiction is a big weed that we don't want that to spread. So, which kind of leads to the other one. We said it usually leads to dishonesty. Well, number 7 is
dishonesty.
So dishonesty, that's a bad one.
Lying.
Yeah. Not good. It kills trust. And secrets are never good, right? Secrets are absolutely a killer in a relationship, especially in a marriage relationship. And in a marriage relationship, you should be able to trust one another. And am I always perfect? No, but I need to be able to let you know what's going on in my life. Like this past week, I opened up to you about some things and what's going on. It wasn't sin, just my frustration with life or something. Yeah. And it's not like you wanted to hear all that, but you wanted to. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, I want to know what you're thinking. And this is obviously, these are things that are pressing on your heart, your mind, and I want to know that.
Right.
I feel like
now you know how to fight too. So it's like, okay, these are, big deals.
Yeah.
And so secrets are just never good. And, it definitely kills trust. So don't be dishonest. Be open with each other, be honest with each other, except for when she asks if this looks good on me. That is a tough question to just say.
There is no way.
Not answering that.
Oh, my goodness.
I don't think so, Tim.
Right. No.
Well, that's why people aren't supposed to ask questions that they don't want the real truthful answer. So
yeah. Okay.
I don't ask those questions.
No. Number 8 is the comparison trap, as you like to call it. So the comparing yourself one with another is very dumb.
Yeah.
And it's troubling. And the note that you put down here, which is kind of funny here, but comparing your spouse to other spouses, that is
I don't think so.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that in front of them. I know that there's people out there that'll be like, man, if my wife was more like Sarah, or if my wife was more like, that person over there, or if my husband was more like so-and-so, you can maybe think that, and you better get those thoughts out of your mind. But don't ever say that to your spouse. My goodness, that's a killer.
Yeah, well, and you're right. You shouldn't even think that.
Yeah,
because you don't know. Like people, I talk to people and they always think, well, you're married to Mike, so everything's different because.
Oh, if they only knew, huh?
But I'm just saying, you don't know. You just don't know somebody till you live with them. And obviously, I think it's great to be married to you. But I'm like, it doesn't lead to
There's different dynamics in play. Everybody puts on a face. So it's comparing where you are in life, jobs, house status. The problem is the Facebook world. Yeah. So on Facebook, everybody has a smiley face. Everybody shows that we're having fun. But you don't go home with that person. You don't go home with that family. You don't see the problems. They don't necessarily put all their problems. They do sometimes, but they don't always put their problems out there for everybody to see. And so it's easy to compare yourself and be like, man, our family's not fun. Our family doesn't do anything fun.
Yeah.
And so kids grow up with that and see that. And they're like, our family's boring. Our family doesn't do anything. And my dad's strict and my dad's this and my mom's this. Yeah, because you don't actually go home with the other people and see what it's like.
Yeah.
And maybe they are better, but that's not the point.
Right.
If you start comparing, that weed will just choke the life out of you.
Yeah.
Because the fact of the matter is, you're not married to those other people.
Right.
You don't have that situation.
Yeah.
So why?
Right.
You
It's
know?
not going to bring joy to your marriage. It's not going to put you in a better place. It's going to make you disgruntled and upset because I don't have what they supposedly have or what it looks like they have.
Well, like, this is a weird example, and you've never done this, but what if a wife, is like, they had some financial issues, and all this, and like, I knew I should have married the doctor like my mom wanted me to. I'd be like, how's that going to make me feel?
Right.
I'm going to feel defeated now and say, like, well, I'm sorry I can't provide for you like you want. Is that going to encourage me to want to be with you or to withdraw?
Right.
So that's the question. The comparison trap is a huge weed that you need to rip out of your life.
Yeah.
All right, number 9. This one is maybe not so much for the crowd that's listening, but I think everyone can relate a little bit. And that is busyness and stress. Everyone can relate with stress.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think everybody can relate to busyness because no matter who you talk to and you
Everybody's
say,
busy.
"How are you doing?"
I'm
busy.
It's busy.
And I
Man,
mean, you
busy.
can live
Life is busy.
try to have the most simple life and whatever. It doesn't matter. Everybody's just very busy.
Everybody. That's
Busy,
the easy
busy,
answer.
busy.
I'm busy. Hey,
Yeah.
But when they really break it down, they're not that busy. But a lot of people, America right now, you think of the normal house. I mean, they go from this job to that to take their kids to soccer practice, to music practice, to dance, to whatever. They've got to be involved in all these different activities, and that's way too much.
Yeah.
You just need to stay home sometime. Just take a break. Like I said, an ideal vacation would be us going into a cabin somewhere in the middle of the mountains and just hanging out with my kids and family, just talk, play a game, doesn't, put together a puzzle if Pam's with you and just enjoy the nature, maybe go for a hike, as I wait back at the cabin for you guys to come back.
You're going to go for a hike?
I'll cook supper. You guys can go on a hike. No, you can do some of that. Just spend some time, get away. But man, just all this busyness. Stress creates problems.
Yeah.
Huge people
problems.
don't make good decisions when they're under stress.
Right.
They have all this stress and they crippled with fear. We kind of talked about that last week.
Yeah.
But
You don't think clearly, so you're not going to make good decisions.
so you're constantly stressed, you're going to make problems.
Yeah.
So relax, man. Don't stress out. Chill out.
That's easy for you to say.
I know, because I'm pretty chill.
You are.
I am pretty chilled and relaxed. Busyness keeps couples from enjoying time together. Well, because they're never together.
Yeah.
And so I kind of made this comment, and I'm not a Sabbath keeper at all, but I did say, man, maybe this would be a good way to just introduce like a day where you just say, hey guys, we're just all going to just stop for the day and just relax. We're so busy. We're so stressed out. Let's just hang out today. Let's, don't plan anything. Let's just see how life goes. Yeah. That's basically our lives every day.
Well, because you can be busy doing good things and things that, you would think God would want you to do, and that's fine. But there is a time where your marriage, your family needs time in order to do well. So I'm like, you have to sometimes say, you know what, we got to take a break. We got to just be alone.
Well, and speaking of busyness and stress, it would lead to the next one, which is interference from in-laws or parents.
Right.
Honestly, it's that adds a lot of stress and busyness. Like, hey, are you coming over? Are you going to be with us? Are you going to do this? We got this event. And I'm like, well, I got my own thing going on here. Yeah. We got this from truelovedates.com. I don't even know what this is.
Never heard of that.
They have top 10 relationship killers. Well, this is their quote, and it was interesting. So you want to go ahead and read it?
Sure. It says the number one relationship stress for most couples has little to do with their relationship and much to do with the relationships they are surrounded by. Too many marriages are struggling simply due to a lack of priorities, finding themselves pulled by everyone else in every which way except toward each other.
And I would agree with that. I mean, that is a very, very key point that we have to make each other the focal point here. Obviously, Jesus Christ is our focal point.
Yeah.
But besides Christ, it's like it's 153. Besides Christ, you're my focal point. Now, to say all the time, I don't know about that, because there might be a time where I got to think about others too. This person needs something or whatever. But for the most part, you got to be the focus. I got to put my priorities. And sometimes, especially in an early marriage, it's very difficult to understand that. And because parents still have expectations, especially if you have both sets of parents living in town, and or you have a huge extended family, and you got brothers and sisters. Like, why don't you come over? And you could be doing something every day if you have a huge family.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
So you got to be very, very careful and very cognizant of that. And just you can do it very nicely and say,
There is no way.
I'm not coming over. Nope, I'm not doing that. Kind of like number 9. I got to cut down that stress for the sake of our relationship.
Right. Well, and like with the kids, sometimes I'll talk to them and talk about different friendships that they have, and you think about which ones are pluses and which ones are minuses. Like who's helping them and who's not. And I think in marriage, you have to sometimes take a step back and consider who's in our life, whether it's parents, in-laws, friends, whoever.
Right.
And which ones of those are helping us to, press on towards godliness and drawing us together, and which ones are kind of the negative. And if they're on the negative list, I'm like, then maybe it's time to step away a little bit and like, okay, no, we need to focus on us. So
yeah, absolutely. You have to do that. The interference from in-laws, parents, friends, even. Yeah. Now, we never had that problem because I didn't have friends.
I say, whatever friends we had, we didn't have friends.
I came down to Louisiana. I graduated. Well, I didn't even graduate, but I left school and I had a few friends and soon lost them. And it was just us. So that was pretty easy. Yeah. And your parents weren't that demanding. We would go over there.
They were pretty busy with jobs and whatever.
Right.
So.
Their own lives. And so they weren't like getting into our lives. So we would go over there. We'd go over there fairly often, but it was something that we wanted to do.
Right.
And that's fine, but you got to be very aware of the expectations there. Right. Because in-laws, outlaws, parents, relatives, brothers, sisters, friends. There's a stereotype. The guys going out with friends, girls going out with their girlfriends and all that. I'm not saying that's wrong. I mean, there might be a time. We never did that. We just never really. You went out with your family sometimes. Like they would drive to Meridian, and you would drive the evening, or you'd go over Tuesday nights with your mom, and play games and stuff. And that's fine. I was like, whatever. I need time to play a game too, and so no. But that was. You have to be very aware of the interference that comes from outside relationships and all that. You got to put your marriage first, and it's just the lack of priorities there. Right. That is our priority, is our marriage first. So anyway, guys, I hope we had a little fun with this. The weeds that you're pulling out. Don't let your don't let your marriage look like our rock bed.
Exactly.
And where it's full of weeds right now. I can't even tell what's the good stuff and the bad stuff. And we're going to have to spend like half a day out there just pulling weeds. And it would have been easier if we could just go out and pluck them out a little bit here, a little bit there.
And in the same way in your marriage, if you pay attention when these things are small, they're much easier to handle than once, it's like we wait till we have huge issues with, any one of these, and it's going to be a nightmare to try to fix it.
And if you don't know how to deal with them, you're like, okay, well, you say to just go and pluck them out when they're little, but how do I go about? Because when I try to deal with this with my wife, I end up making it a big problem. Mm-hmm. And there is a technique to do this. There is a way to bring some of these things up and deal with some of these issues without making a big issue out of them. Yeah. If you need help with that, there's books, there's things like that. You can email us. We can help out a little bit. But find someone at your church that you know and respect, that's older and have been through some of the battles and you think has a really good marriage, and sit down and talk with them. Be like, how do I do this? How do I? There are plenty of books out there, and get some good biblical ones.
Well, and that's going back to the pride one real quick. That's what some people think is a big problem, is doing marriage alone, and people feel like, oh, we got this and we can just figure it out. And so you listen to a show like this and you're like, oh yeah, we kind of maybe do have some of those problems. I'm like, well, you need to seek help.
You got to get your partner on board too.
Yeah,
you can't do it alone. You can do it alone for a little bit, and it might help you personally, but in order for a marriage to work completely, it takes two people.
Yeah.
You know, I know we read a book a long time ago. It just says all it takes is just a woman doing her job to have a good marriage. I disagree with that. You have to have both people. Like doing your job, that's fine. You can still do your job, whether I'm a knucklehead or not. But to have a godly marriage takes both people giving of themselves and going toward God. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that. And maybe next week, Chuck and Larry will be back. I'm not sure whether they'll be on their trips, on their wherever they are in the country. But if not, Sarah and I will be here. So anyway.
And you got to say something about the shindig.
Oh, yes. The Elaylon Family Camp / Shindig this year. We call it the Elaylon Family Camp. Elaylon means one another. And it's just a theme that we had a couple years ago, and we liked it. So the Elaylon Family Camp, you can go to the website. The website is MississippiShindig.com. You can see past things that have gone on there. You could listen to messages from past events and pictures and different things. But sign up is open. You just go to MississippiShindig.com and you can sign up there. The cost and everything's up there. I know it's a little costly, but it's worth. It's a good weekend. It's this year's theme, I think, is freedom, and that's very open-ended. You know, freedom in our marriages, freedom with our kids, freedom from sin. You know, there's a lot of different types of freedom that we need to address and talk about. And so, yes, thank you. That is opening up. So if you want to be a part of that, come on, sign up. And so anyway, thank you again for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, click that subscribe button, subscribe and like. And we appreciate you sharing the show with others. And thank you for listening. And we'll be back next week.
Hi, I'm Joshua Charleston, the producer for The Mike Charleston Show. If you enjoy listening to the show, please help us spread the word by liking, subscribing, sharing, leaving a review, or just tell a friend. If you're watching on YouTube, feel free to leave a comment down below. If you'd like to be a part of the show, please email us at talk@fellowshipofbelievers.org. We look forward to hearing from you.
We hope you enjoyed listening to The Mike Charleston Show. The Mike Charleston Show.